Okay, everyone. So, welcome to today's session. Today's session is a seminar based around basically how to write a good master's level essay for the Masters in Disaster Management. Okay, so the very first thing that we need you to do when writing an essay is to read the question and to understand the task. So the first assignment that you've been set is an essay task, which is the production of a 4,500 word critical reflection assignment that's examining, first of all, the key issues relating to formulating, writing, and implementing an emergency plan for a relevant organization. So this part of the essay, what we're asking you to do is to critically evaluate the opportunities and challenges that are associated with formulating and writing an emergency plan. We want you to discuss relevant principles. So think back to the previous two seminars where we talked about David Alexander's principles of writing an emergency plan. You would definitely want to be thinking about referencing Alexander here. Also consider operating procedures, associated protocols, and policy domains. And then where possible, the focus should be on an emergency plan designed to handle one identifiable form of natural or man-made disaster. And as it says in the assignment brief, it's recommended that up to 3,500 words of the assignment should be spent on this task. So, anywhere from about 2,500 to 3,000, 3,500 for this part of the assignment is what we would be expecting you to do. Then the second part of the assignment is to consider the potential and real implications for the wider use of crisis and disaster management training. So what we're expecting you to do here is to sort of link that theoretical discussion, the conceptual discussion of the various principles that underpin a disaster management plan with the actual real world application of that plan, and to consider some of the implications, as we've said, for disaster management training as well. So again, this part of the assessment brief says that you should further identify and critically evaluate the ongoing opportunities and challenges identified in the first section in terms of how these could be handled and addressed in terms of design and the use of wider disaster management training. And again, it's recommended that up to 1,000 words of the assignment should be spent on this task. So 25% of the overall mark for coursework 1. And what we say in the assignment brief is that you should use your own simulation exercise that you undertook during the training week with Richard to help inform your discussion. So you can refer back to it and critically reflect on it when you're writing your assignment. Okay, so before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the specific essay task that you've been assigned? Okay, so I'm going to take silence. Sorry. Yaktan, do you have a question?
Yes, Chris, is the second part regarding the disaster management training. Is it similar to disaster exercise?
Yes, so you can, yes, absolutely. It's about a disaster management exercises, and very much you have the opportunity. It's suggested in the assignment brief that you should reflect on the simulation exercise that you undertook in Oman as part of the training week for this module. So yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume there aren't any more questions on the actual brief itself. As we move forward, if anything does pop into your mind, please feel free just to, as I said, interject, raise your voice, and let me know. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is after having talked about understanding the task, I'm going to work through the various stages of writing an essay. So what it is that we're looking for you to do whilst you're writing the essay, what it is that you need to do in order to achieve the best possible mark. Okay, so of course, this assessment is a master level critical essay. It's not report writing. So we're expecting a high level of engagement from all of the students on the module. And as befits postgraduate work, the coursework should, of course, engage with academic concepts and writings on disaster management. So we've given you, of course, the Alexander book as a starting point, but we expect you to go beyond that and to consider other source material from within the disaster management literature. And of course, you have the reading list that I've already highlighted to you that you can make use of to find other material that links into the topics that you want to discuss in your essay. Then we want you to make critical use of primary and secondary sources. So by primary sources here, we're thinking about emergency plans. Part of the brief asks you to potentially evaluate, compare and contrast 2 emergency plans. And we've uploaded 8 of those plans to Brightspace, which you should all have seen by now. It's a very good idea to look at those plans and maybe compare and contrast 2 plans and draw out some of the key ideas, the key issues that come out from your evaluation of those plans. So those are our primary sources, right? The emergency plans themselves. And then we have a range of secondary sources. So academic articles by authors, newspaper articles, or even opinion pieces that you might find in newspapers or on other sources on the internet. So again, you can use these sources to add substance to the arguments that you make. The assignment must be, and this is very important, it has to be fully referenced and include an extensive bibliography that will not be included in the word count. So I would suggest that for a master's level piece of work that's 4,500 words, you'd be looking at a minimum of 12 to 15 sources, and probably more than that, really, maybe 20 references to write a paper of this length at this level. And as we've said before, use the referencing and skills advice available to you. You have the video clip seminar from our librarian that we ran last week that you can use to help you navigate the Bournemouth University's library website and to fully access all of the sources available to you. Okay, so how to write a good 4,500 word essay. What is it that we're looking for from you guys when you're writing these essays? So I'm going to work through the various stages now in terms of writing a good essay. So the first part is our introduction. Does someone want to help me out here? What am I looking for in a good introduction to an essay? I'm looking for 2 things.
Setting out your aims and objectives in the introduction.
Okay, excellent. Setting out your aims and objectives. So this is what we call signposting. I'm expecting you to signpost your argument. And then we have one other thing that I'm looking for you to do.
Background information, overview of the topic.
Excellent, right? So your background information and overview of the topic, right? So the 2 things that we're looking for in a good essay at master's level is to set the context. So this is just very much just a brief discussion, maybe 150, 200 words that sets the context for the essay. Explain the context in which you're writing your arguments. So, for example, an essay on emergency plans, you might briefly introduce the concept and explain what this is. Why is it important? Maybe link it to the country, the organization that you're looking at, the agency that you're looking at. Right? Who's the emergency plan relevant for? And then the second part of it is, of course, signposting. And what we mean by signposting is setting out how the analysis will unfold. As David said, your aims and your objectives, right? So the most obvious way of doing this, of course, you don't have to do it like this, but the most obvious way of doing this is in the first section of the essay, the analysis shall focus on. In the second section of the essay, I will then look at. In the third section of the essay, I will draw everything together, right? So this is what we mean by signposting. You signpost your argument. And so you've only got 4,500 words here. So for your introduction, you're probably looking at maybe 500, 750 words at an absolute maximum. Now, what I've got in this presentation and in these slides are just some sort of images that I've taken from journal articles to demonstrate what I mean by these different aspects of writing an essay. So I've taken my images from an article that was written in an area that I study on terrorism by Richard Jackson and Jeroen Gunning. And you'll see that this idea of signposting, right? It's not just what we ask students to do in their essays, but it's what academics do in their writing. You look at any good journal article and you'll see throughout that article that academics constantly signposting and re-articulating and reiterating their arguments. So this is from Jackson and Gunning's article, What's So Religious About Religious Terrorism? The topic isn't important. What's important is the way in which they articulate their argument. So here we can see they say the discussion proceeds in three main sections. First, we describe the origins of religious terrorism. The next section engages in a critical examination. The concluding part offers alternative suggestions. So you can see how this little paragraph that they have at the end of their introduction simply signposts the argument. That's what we're looking for you to do in all of your academic writing. Okay, moving on. We then move on to the main body of our essay. What are we looking for in the main body of the essay? What do you think the first thing we might do in an essay is?
Literature.
Okay, so Tan says we look at the literature. Yes, absolutely. That's potentially something we can do. We could have a literature review. Anything else? What is it that we're doing when we're looking at that literature, though? What are we looking to draw out?
Theories and definitions.
Excellent. Okay, that's exactly what we're looking for, right? So, of course, this isn't, I'll say this throughout, this isn't the only way to write an essay. It's probably the safe way to write an essay. So the first thing that we're looking to do, maybe in the main body of any essay, is to briefly engage with the literature, a literature review, or to engage with the key concepts that underpin the topic that we're looking for. So, if we take this essay on emergency plans, of course, we're going to expect you to discuss the emergency plan literature, to engage with relevant concepts and principles. So, as we said, you have the David Alexander book as the starting point. Of course, we're going to expect you to reference his book on emergency plans. Then, of course, to engage with maybe some other literature that deals with this type of topic. So, for example, if you're interested in looking at the pre-disaster stage, preparation and mitigation for preparing for a disaster scenario, you might look at the literature on risk reduction. Right, there's a very extensive literature on the concept of risk that you can use to inform your understanding of writing an emergency plan. And as well as that, for this essay, we'd be also expecting you in this first part of the main body of the essay to introduce and discuss, compare and contrast two emergency plans. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do they interrelate? What could they potentially teach us about writing an emergency plan? So as I've said, cite the key authors. And of course, we need you to find more literature on emergency planning to support your argument. So it's not enough to just simply reference Alexander. You need to find a few more sources to really add substance to what you're arguing, what you're saying. And of course, if you are unsure about how to write an essay at this level, I would suggest that the safest thing to do is always to discuss theory and concepts immediately after the introduction, to engage in your literature review at that point. So you basically talk about the theory and why it's important in the context of the essay question that you're trying to answer, in the context of better understanding the topic. And as we've said, for this section of the essay, I'm looking for you to produce somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 words. Okay, now just a quick point on how to cite in the main body of the text. One of the things that we ask you to do is to reference correctly when you're writing an essay. So again, from the Jackson article, there are two things that you should really pay attention to in terms of referencing, right? So this is to do with when we cite in the main body of a text. So here we have a quote on the concept of religious violence. Sorry, no, not a quote, sorry. We've got the authors re-articulating the arguments made by other authors in their own words, right? So they talk about the concept of religious violence, and they reference its long history in Western scholarship. And in order to do that, they cite Hassan Cleaver and Rittberger and Kavanagh. Now, they haven't taken a direct quote. So in that case, what that means is that you don't need to put the page number. When you're simply re-articulating an author's arguments in your own words, you just put the name of the author and the date at which the publication, the piece of work was published. And again, you see that they talk about Rappaport's famous article on terrorism. And again, because they haven't used a direct quote, there are no page numbers. There's just simply a reference to the year of publication. Now, when you're directly quoting a source, that's when you have to introduce page numbers. So here you can see that the authors have cited a quote where Bruce Hoffman says, "Religious terrorist violence is a sacramental act or divine duty." And they reference his name, the year, and the page number from which the quote is taken. Okay, so that's what we mean when we're talking about citing in the main body of the text. And that's what we'd expect you to be doing as a master's level piece of work at Bournemouth University for this module and for this course. So as I've said, if you're re-articulating an author's argument in your own words, then you only need the name of the author and the date. For direct quotes, make sure you include the author, name, date, and page number. So as I've shown there, religious terrorist violence is a sacramental act. We take that from Hoffman's book, page 88. Just go back. Okay, does anyone have any questions on referencing or citation at this point?
Yes, I do. What if I wanted to write the same thing, like religious terrorist violence is blah, blah, blah? Do I quote Huffman, or do I quote the writer of the essay?
Oh, so sorry. So what you're asking is, do you, so say you find Hoffman's quote in Jackson's article, but you want to borrow that quote. What I would always say to a student in that context is that you write Hoffman 2006, page 88, and then I would write in Jackson and Gunning, whatever year the article is. Sorry, it says it there, 2011, and then the page number. So you give both, right? So that there can be no suggestion that you haven't that you've in any way plagiarized. Does that make sense, Asma?
Yes. So I put two references in text citations.
Yes, that's what I would do. I would write, Hoffman 2006, page 88 in, and then the actual publication that you took it from.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'm going to take silence as the cue to move on and to continue the presentation on writing an essay. Okay, so moving on then. What am I looking for in the second part of my essay? So in the first part, we've talked about theory and concepts. We've maybe engaged in a literature review and identified gaps in the literature or areas in the literature where the topic that we're talking about, where we can find real areas of agreement, right? So we've gone through our concepts and our theories. What am I going to do next? Any ideas, people? Okay, I will take silence as a cue to give you some suggestions. So I would say that after you've talked about your theory and after you've talked about your concepts, the safest thing to do next is what we really expect you to do is sort of apply that in practice. So in terms of this essay, you're kind of already doing that in the first part of the main body of the essay, where you're talking about the theories and concepts, and then you're applying them and looking at them in the context of comparing and contrasting two emergency plans. In a regular essay, what I'd be looking for you to do is to use a case study or an example that supports our argument, or examples, plural. You can use one, two, maybe three case studies, one, two, three examples that can really help to illuminate the theoretical discussion, and you use that theory to inform your critique of and your analysis of those case studies. So again, we're looking at you to cite and reference not just the theoretical research, right, but research on those issues in case studies. So you may have, just to use an example that I know that there's a lot of literature on, you might look at the response to Hurricane Katrina in the United States of America, right? There are lots and lots of academic articles that talk about that case study. You could use that material as the case study through which you then you use the theories and concepts to explore that case study. But for this essay, what we're looking for you to do, sort of in the second part, is actually to evaluate the ongoing opportunities and challenges identified in the first section in terms of how these could be handled and addressed in terms of the design and use of wider disaster management training. So really your analysis is about how the process of writing an emergency plan and the theories and concepts can really help to inform how we then go about training people in terms of disaster management, in terms of designing the programs, designing scenario situations, and implementing those training programs to help prepare people for actual disaster management scenarios in real life. That's what we're expecting you to do in terms of the second part of this essay. So really thinking about the theories and concepts we've discussed and what those theories and concepts, those principles that Alexander highlights, what they have to say in terms of training, disaster management training. And of course, as it says in the assignment brief, here we're asking you to think about your simulation experience and to critically reflect on that as well. So you can bring that into your essay and discuss that as well towards the end of the essay. And again, here we're looking for about 800 to 1,000 words for this part of the essay. Okay, again, I just ask anyone. So we've done our introduction. We've worked through the first part of the main body of our essay. We've discussed theories and concepts. We've looked at and applied those theories and concepts to two disaster and emergency plans. We then thought about the lessons that can be learned from our analysis of those disaster management plans in the context of training disaster management professionals. Do you have any questions on the structure of the essay to this point?
Yes, please. How to decide about the number of paragraphs you wrote in the essay in general, or in main body especially?
Okay, how to decide on the number of paragraphs in an essay? Of course, it will differ from essay to essay. It depends on the number of key points that you want to raise. I'd say that a good essay, a good paragraph structure is anywhere between 7 and 10 sentences, maybe. A paragraph shouldn't really be more than 180 to 250 words. I guess you probably have 4 paragraphs per page. But again, it will vary and it will depend on how many points you want to make. So say in the first section of your essay, you want to make 4 key points about emergency planning. I would have 4 paragraphs to make each of those points. Or if one of the points requires longer explanation, you'd extend it out into 2 paragraphs. It really depends on the work that you're doing, the concepts you're looking at, and how much focus you want to put on a particular point. But what I would say is don't have short paragraphs that are like 2 or 3 sentences long. Anything that's that long isn't really a paragraph. Does that answer your question, Ahmed?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
Should we write any subtitles?
Okay. I would say for master's level essays, I tend to prefer not having subtitles. I think it should be a 4,500 word narrative with an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. However, if it helps you to structure your essay, you can certainly have an introduction, maybe one subtitle for each of the topics that you want to cover. So you might have a subtitle for concepts and theories, a subtitle for emergency plans that you're looking at, and then a subtitle for training implications and a subtitle for conclusion. But absolutely no more than that in terms of subtitles. Is that okay, Asma?
Yes, I got your point. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Anyone else? No?
Yes,
Okay. Oh, yeah, go on. Yeah, go on, Salim. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question about the.
Yes, go ahead. I'm really sorry, Salim. I can't.
In the part 2, is it to evaluate? It's not clear.
Part 2. Yeah, so in part 2, the point about evaluation is what the assignment brief is asking you to do is to evaluate, to critically reflect on the lessons that you've learned from your analysis of the literature, the theories and concepts, of your discussion of the 2 emergency plans, to evaluate how that can help to inform understanding of how we go about designing and implementing. I think is it designing? Sorry, yeah, designing and implementing disaster management training. So it's about critically reflecting.
Critically reflecting. Okay, clear.
Yeah, happy?
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Any more questions? I will give people an opportunity at the end to ask questions again as well if anything jumps out at you. Okay, so let's move on then. Our conclusion. What am I looking for in a good conclusion?
You sum up.
A summary, yes.
To summarize our findings.
Summarize the findings, absolutely, right. So for me, a good conclusion draws your argument together. Okay, what I'm looking for is to reaffirm the 3 or 4 key points that you've made throughout. So for this essay, you might remind us what you think about emergency planning and the theories related to it. You might reflect on why you chose the 2 plans that you identified and used as your example or your case study, and what you learned from the analysis. And then you might finish by noting the main conclusions that you've drawn from the analysis and the research that you've conducted in the context of thinking about training disaster management professionals. So at the start, I introduced you to the idea of signposting your argument at the start, where you talk about your 4 or 5 main, the 4 or 5 ways in which you're going to approach the essay, the way in which it will unfold. Your conclusion is basically your final act of signposting. It's where you draw everything that you've said together. And again here, because we've got such a small word count of just 4,500 words, I wouldn't expect anything more than 500 to 800 words for a conclusion. Probably closer to 500 words, 2 or 3 paragraphs at most. Okay, so the point of a conclusion is the way to write an essay is simply to say what you're going to say. That's your introduction. Say it. That's your main body. And then say it again. That's your conclusion. Very simple way of thinking about it. Okay, some final points then in terms of your bibliography. I've taken an image here from the article by Jackson in which he writes his bibliography. You can see here how the bibliography, or we sometimes refer to it as a reference list, at the end of the essay is formatted in a very particular way. So normally it's author, date, name of the article or book, the place that the article was published, and the publisher themselves. This is what we expect in terms of master's level referencing. If you're ever unsure about how to reference a particular text, of course there are referencing guides on the Bournemouth University Library website, but as well as that, you can just pick up any academic book, any journal article, and just turn back to the reference list at the end and just see how the authors of those articles and books have done it themselves, and use that as a basis for writing your own referencing list. But there are very specific ways to reference books and articles, and in particular internet sources as well. So I'd encourage all of you to go away and check how to do that accurately and properly. It is relatively straightforward. The referencing guides that are available on the website, on the Bournemouth University Library website, clearly tell you how to reference everything from books to articles to internet sources, even to YouTube videos if you so choose to use those. And then finally, some housekeeping in terms of writing our essay. Of course, as I said at the start, this isn't the only way to write an essay. It's very much a safe way of doing it at master's level. I would suggest, as I said, check your referencing. So many marks are lost here for not doing this properly at master's level. It's probably the biggest reason for students losing marks when they don't reference properly. You can lose an entire grade boundary if you don't cite or reference correctly, and if you don't include a bibliography or reference list, you can even potentially fail an essay that you should have passed, because we simply can't verify where you got the information from. So make sure you include your references and your reference list at the end. As we've already discussed, a couple of you raised the point, of course, write in paragraphs, so no short paragraphs that are 3 or 4 sentences long. Use a paragraph per point that you want to make would be a suggestion that I would have for you. And then, of course, grammar. Check your tense. Try not to switch between past and present in the same paragraph. And of course, watch for grammatical errors. I know for many of you that English is not your first language, so we will be very understanding about grammatical errors. But I would suggest to all of you that before you submit any piece of master's level work, that you do give it a good proofread, or get someone who speaks English quite well, or sorry, can write English quite well, to maybe have a look at it for you as well. We won't penalise you, very heavily or in any way, shape or form for bad grammar, unless it's unreadable. We are very aware that sometimes grammatical errors can be problematic for students whose first language isn't English. But I must say you should really, definitely give your work a proofread before you submit it. Make sure that you're happy with it before you submit it. Okay. Any questions on the assignment brief or this presentation so far?
Yeah, regarding the writing style, I think we need to use the time Romans, or is there any other specific style we need to use?
Yeah, just something that's readable. Normally we say Times New Roman, Arial, Verdana, Calibri, 10, 12 point. I prefer it to be single line spaced. So single line spaced is fine. And yeah, that's fine. Obviously, use it as a word processor, and again, we prefer it if you upload the essays as Word documents.
Okay.
Yeah,
Click.
I have
Thank
a
you.
question.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, Yaktan, was that a question from you?
Yes. In regards of referencing,
Yes.
how can we reference an information that we got during our seminars with Richard? And another thing, how are we supposed to reference if any gained experience, work experience, or knowledge gained from some kind of in the disaster management field based on our work? Are we supposed to support our decision, our discussion with a reference, or it's
Okay.
enough with explaining that we have the experience or the knowledge on that field?
Okay, so there's two parts to what you've just asked there, Yaktan. So the first is obviously about referencing information that you got from Richard in your seminars. I would suggest that Richard, obviously, when he's presenting this stuff, he got his research and his arguments from academic sources from the books. So what you really need to be doing is, when you're writing an academic essay, is to be referencing the academic literature rather than using the material that Richard has got. If you're going to reference, for example, a policy document, you reference the policy document and not necessarily Richard's slides. So I would suggest that you don't, at master's level, use that material. You use it obviously to help inform your understanding, but you need to find other sources to make your arguments. Now, in terms of your own profession, the second point around your own professional experiences, I think that you can build that into the final, 500 words where you critically reflect on, the implications of the research that you've done for disaster management training. And I think at that point, you can obviously you don't need to have a clear reference, because it's very difficult to reference personal experience. There you frame the discussion around critical reflection from my own experience, and you just make it clear that you're talking from your own experience in the essay. Does that answer both points to the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you sure? You sound a little bit unsure there.
Very sure.
Very sure. Okay, good. Anyone else?
I have a question, yeah. There's a book that has, I cannot remember the name of the book exactly, but it says Introduction to Disaster Management. Who's the author of this book? Is it the university itself or the team, or whom exactly? Because I couldn't find who wrote this book.
Off the top of my head and without looking at it, I'm not 100% sure. Sorry, sorry, Asma. If you, I'll have a look. I'll have a look on after the.
I found it on the Kineo portal.
Yeah, I'll have a look.
It says chapter 1.
Yeah. I'll have a look after the webinar, and I'll find out the reference for you, and I'll post it on the Brightspace announcements page. I know the text.
Okay,
I know the text that you're talking about, but just off the top of my head, I don't know what the exact reference is. So I will post it later for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions?
Chris, Dave, not a question, but for the Omani students, Richard's asked me if I would do some mentoring in terms of some of the academic work, and having done a master's degree before and done an assignment on Hurricane Katrina, which I gave to Richard about 10 years ago.
Wonderful.
He asked me if I would mentor some of the students. So if any of the Omanis on here, once you've done some of your work, if you want to just run it by me first of all, then I'm very happy to do so, just to make sure that you're on track. I'm going through the same process again, so I should be a little bit more averse to it than you guys are, but please do lean on me.
Thank you, David. That's very, very generous of you to help support your colleagues like that. Okay, everyone. So I just want to sort of start drawing this to a close in terms of this session, and just highlight a couple of points before we finish. So next week we're going to be doing a seminar on comparing and contrasting two emergency plans. So the purpose of this is to sort of help build into your essay. So the next seminar is next Tuesday, 23rd of April at 5 p.m. Oman time. And what I want you guys to do is to pick two emergency plans from Brightspace, or if you're feeling brave and you want to go away and find an emergency plan from a different country or a different agency or organization, one that you want to use in the writing of your essay, you are more than welcome to do that. And I want you to compare and contrast them. So maybe come up with a few bullet points, how they're similar, how they're different. Consider the implications, right? So what are the implications of the differences between the plans? So different emergency plans from different countries might focus on different aspects of the disaster management cycle. Maybe have a look at that and think about why that is and what the implications of that might be. And then consider, is one plan better than another in different areas? So for example, one plan might be more suited to preparedness, whilst another might be better at response. And to think about why that is. So think about the plans and how they can help you write your essay. Ooh. Yeah, so there we go. That's what I need you guys to do for the seminar next week. So come prepared to discuss the two emergency plans that you've selected and what you think are some of the similarities and differences, how they can be compared and contrasted against one another. Is that clear for everyone?
Yes, it's clear. And thank you, David, for your support.
That's not a problem. Thanks, Ahmed. Right, so just before I finish, one last thing, just to show you all. If I just click on the internet and I go here. Right, so you can see I'm logged into Brightspace here. So for next week, the 22nd to the 26th of April, we have the link to the GoToMeeting. There's a discussion forum here where you can, if you so choose, you can engage in a discussion with your colleagues on the course. You can note down and highlight some of the points that you've come up with and talk about that, set up a discussion forum. And of course, you have the links to all of the module plans. And I just want to, one last thing before you all go, I just wanted to just quickly highlight week 4. This is this week. Of course, we've just had the how to write an essay plan session. At the end of the week, if you can try and submit 1,500 words or as close as you can get to 1,500 words, if you haven't been able to write that much, this is an opportunity for you to submit the first part of the assignment to me so that I can provide feedback for you that you will then be able to use to improve your writing in time for the final submission. Okay. Any further questions from anyone? Is that all clear?
Regarding assignment number, so should we just write CPD1 or?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of labeling the document, just, CPD1, assignment 1, first draft, that's fine. Okay, everyone. Was that helpful? Do you feel a little bit clearer now about how to write an essay for this module?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris, I think that's very helpful, and I think the 1,500 words by the 19th might be a bit of a stretch at the moment, just given other commitments. But thank you very much indeed for trying to achieve that.
Okay. Well, what I'll say to everyone is, of course, what I've done is I've gone on the basis of when this module last run. If you can't get the 1,500 words done by the 19th of April, I'm happy for you to submit it a bit later, by the following week. There's no, for a draft, there's no hard and fast deadline for drafts, like there is for the final assessment. So if you do need a little bit longer, just drop me an email and we can arrange a different time. But I'm going to run tutorials in 2 weeks' time, and so I will need to get the submission before, at least a couple of days before that, so I'll be able to talk through some feedback with you, if you want to make the most of the tutorial. Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, so any further comments or points from anyone? Any questions before we finish? No, I'm going to take silence as we are pretty much done. If any more questions do spring to mind, as always, feel free to send me an email. I'll upload the video of this as soon as I can after the session. And as I said, try and get your first draft, even if it's only a few hundred words, into me by Friday the 19th of April, so that I can get you some feedback on your work so far. And if you do need a bit more time, as I said, send me an email and we can arrange that as well. Okay? Thank you everyone for attending today's session.
Cheers. Thank you, Chris.